Hi, I'm Chris Ott, and this is a talk that I'm giving today, 21st of May, at the Circle Center in Myrtle Beach. And this may be the beginning of a series of talks on various topics. We'll see how it goes. I don't know if they'll be weekly or less often. The difference between this and other talks that I've given is that these will be hosted by the Circle of Friends YouTube channel. And so hopefully Baba lovers will find these, and the subject will be always something to do with Baba, Mayor Baba. And some people may be joining this group. We're just going to be sitting in some couches here in one corner of the Circle Center. Because it's kind of conversational. I like that idea. But today was kind of short notice, so at best maybe a couple people will come and maybe nobody will come at all, and that's okay. One of the tests of integrity is if you can do something and you don't need attention for it. So, my mother, Phyllis Ott, I was always admired this about her, is she used to give a God Speaks meeting. And she would post it, and very often nobody would come, and she would still show up. And I always thought, now that takes some character to do that. And I have a friend who once went and surprised Phyllis, and she had a good time. Joyce Barrison, who's a very good friend of mine. But anyway, the subject of this talk is going to be about how I first heard about Mayor Baba. And my story's a little different. I wasn't born into a Baba family, but I was born into a family that very quickly heard of Baba after my sister and I were born. And I had two older sisters from my mother's first marriage when they heard of Baba. And that was when my parents heard of Baba from friends in Woodstock, was in the spring of 1964. And it's kind of a long story about how my parents heard about Baba from the Rileys, but all of that is conveyed in a book that's due to eventually be released by my father. It's a yet unpublished memoir. It's called Journey Out of Darkness. It's a long book, and Jacob Weintraub, what is his name? Not Weintraub, I can't remember his last name. Jake, a friend of mine, is editing it right now in Vermont, and in there he describes in great detail how he and my mother got to Woodstock and how they finally heard about Mayor Baba, and it stops about there actually. So I was in 1964, in the spring of 1964, I was born in July 1959. So I was still 4 years old, and I was a very aware 4-year-old. So there are 4-year-olds maybe that are babyish, but I wasn't, and my daughter wasn't either. There's some people that are just very aware, and I have a video that I'm going to play where my father describes the moment he told me about Baba. It was recorded in 1983, I believe, in Southern California at a Sahadas. And he's describing events that took place like 20 years earlier in 1964. So let's watch that video and we'll come back.
So while Phyllis was away that morning, I went over to the studio for a while with work. I took Chris with me. And then we went back to the house, and I'm sitting outside the house on our picnic bench, and I started talking. I remember it very, very clearly, because that was the day that I told Chris about Mayor Baba for the first time. And I started telling him all about Baba, and he was really interested. And finally, I said, see, God has come down in the form of a man. to help all the people in the world. And so they said, and then I was standing up on the picnic table by then because I was really happy. I was standing up on the picnic table, and here's this tiny little fellow standing down there on the ground. And I'm saying to him, Mayor Baba is the highest of high. And he's looking up, and he was impressed. And he stayed impressed.
So that is the story of how I heard of Mayor Baba. And as Dad said, I stayed impressed. And it's true, I did. And I have 3 sisters that were alive at the time. And they are not Baba lovers today. So I'm the last one. Both my parents are dead. And I kind of carry on the legacy of those events. And here I am sharing that. I guess that's a little unusual. Some people are born into a Baba family, so there is no story even for their parents to tell when they first told their kid about Baba. This one's unusual because while I wasn't born into a Baba family, there was a moment where I was told. And the reason that he told me is because I was like his little protege, and he had just heard Baba, literally, and he was just very excited to tell me about it. And there's a little more to this story where I rode away on my tricycle and I came back up to the screen door of the kitchen and I said, there's nothing to think about but Baba. So I was really actually thinking about it. There's another part that he doesn't tell in this recording, but he said that I said, when he told me that Baba was the avatar and explained what that meant, I said, oh, that's good, because it means I'm not. And I always thought that was interesting, because I got it that the avatar suffers, because I knew about Jesus, and I got that Jesus was also the avatar. So it's not a job that you want to have, to be a sacrifice for everybody. And to have that burden of all of humanity and all of creation on your shoulders. Well, anyway, so what else is there to say besides sharing that? I wanted to say something, which is that I'm writing a memoir myself right now, and it's going quite well. And it's going to take a very long time to write, but I described these events of my father, my relationship with my father, things that happened that only he told me about. But one of them I remember, and it's very important, is that when I was about 5, my mother would sometimes come and tell me and my little sister stories before we went to bed. She was about 3, she's 2 years younger, Leslie. But one night, she was busy, and he came and he told me a story, and he might have done this a couple of times, a couple of nights, the same story. And the story was, in the beginning, before there was anything, there was God, but God was asleep. And then God woke and asked, who am I? And his first answer was, I know, I'm stone. So he goes all the way through evolution and reincarnation and then involution in the story. So that long that time story. And then said in the end, God realized, oh, I know, I'm not a man, I'm not a woman, I am God. And that's the story. Many years later, when I was about in my 50s, I was reading Brabazon's book, Stay with God, which is a favorite book of mine. And Brabazon was a Sufi poet, and he lived in Australia. And the book came out about 5 years before I was born. And I was reading, and I suddenly realized, wait a minute, this is that story as my dad told it to me. And then luckily my mother was not only alive, but she didn't yet have dementia, and I called her and I said, when I was 5 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, were you reading Stay with God? And she said, oh yes, that's what we were reading at the Riley's house on Monday nights. They had met the Rileys, and they told them about Baba, and they would go for these Baba meetings on Monday nights. And so that's exactly where my father got this story. And it's not a babyish story. He had to simplify it a lot to tell it to me as a childhood story. But the importance of that is that I have a belief, which I've tried to convey many times, and it's going to be in my memoir too, that normally when we hear Baba, we begin and we study God Speaks and things. Most people are already adults. They're young adults, let's say, at the youngest. Sometimes they're older adults. But by the time they are hearing about Baba, they have already acquired a mass of beliefs and theories and knowledge about creation. And they may be Darwinian ideas, or maybe creationist ideas, that are Christian, or whatever you've heard, or that there's a debate. And so when you are hearing a new idea and you're an adult, you have to integrate that with what you already have. You have to sort of make a cohesive view of the world. You can't just take it. You have to incorporate it. The mind has to do this. If it doesn't, it'll just be all chaos. So it's not a criticism. It's the way the mind works. So, but if the first story that you ever were told of the creation of the world is Baba's, there isn't any conflict. There isn't anything to incorporate it with. You just hear that. And then later in life, much later, if you hear other accounts, then you'll compare them with your own and choose or discard them by comparing them. And now, so what I'm saying is that if you're an adult and you hear this, you're going to incorporate other ideas, and so you're going to read those things into what Baba says. I'll give you an example. If Baba talks about God or a soul in a book, and you're reading it for the first time by Baba, you're going to understand those words in terms of impressions that you've gathered from other things you've read and heard all your life. And you're going to think he's talking about that, the way you understand those terms. But the problem is that very often Baba isn't meaning that the same way. It's a different meaning entirely. For instance, I won't get too deep into it here. It's in my writing because I don't want to lose track here. So now let's say that you try to solve this problem by just teaching a child about Baba when they're very young, like when they're 4, like I was, or 5. Well, the problem is, who's teaching it? Well, it's going to be this person who heard it when they were a young adult, and it got admixed with these other ideas, and so it's kind of a distorted version. So the child's still going to come away with a distorted version then. So what was different about my father telling me this story? Well, the difference is that my father had no background at all about God initially. Later, he read the Bible and things because of Baba. But his father was an atheist and communist. And they didn't talk about God or religion or Jesus around the supper table. It just wasn't a subject. And his father sent him to art school, and Lynn has said, pretty famously, I think it might be in his book, In Quest of the Face of God, that when he heard of Baba, his religion had been art. And that's really true. He got all that we normally get from the solace of religious ideas from paintings, from art, from the history of art. And so he basically was kind of a blank slate when he heard of Baba himself. And the main thing that struck him is he'd never heard of the idea of the avatar. And he even commented that he was surprised he didn't have that idea of the avatar, because it's in the English language too, just like we have the other Hindu terms like yoga and karma. We have that word avatar. Today it means something different, but we get it. You can look it up. So, but he had never thought that anybody, about that before. And but gradually I think that my father got more influenced by this books that he heard on talking books and stuff like that. I don't know where he was when he died, but the point of all this is that I was hearing it for the first time, and what he was telling me was all new to him too. So it didn't have that sort of like that taint of preconceptions, preconceived ideas. I will give one example. When we hear the word soul and God, we kind of think of souls are cells or something, or smaller cells that are in our body, and God created your soul. That's not what Baba teaches at all. In Baba, actually, there's only one soul. All souls are one. It's only the sanskars that are, as they are acquired over the course of evolution and then reincarnation, that we develop the impression of being a separate being. And that gets tied to the consciousness that we've acquired, and we call that separate self, our self, but it's really our ego. And that's strange. We don't really have a teaching of souls, or souls and God. We have there's one soul. That's right in God Speaks. It's actually right on page 1. All souls are one. So the other thing is, I often say, what does Baba really teach? And this is in that story that Dad sort of paraphrased from Stay with God. Baba's teaching it's not that there's a God. And you see, once you put the indefinite article onto the word God, it becomes a distinct thing, a discrete object, amongst others. That's not what Baba teaches. There's not this world and there's a God somewhere. Rather, there's only God, and we are it. And it doesn't mean, like Spinoza thought, that the things we see are God. They're an illusion, a dream. So God is that which is dreaming, the dreamer, the witness, not the things witnessed. The things witnessed are not apart from him, so you could say that they're non-different from him. But that's not what we mean. We don't mean God is the world that we see. We mean God is the dreamer that dreams that world. And each one of us is God dreaming that world. And that is what came through that story that my dad told me when I was 5, was this difference. Because that's how the story goes if you read it. I can put the page number in the notes. Anyway, that's my talk. And I want to end it by saying I noticed that I don't know that a lot of people realize that when there's a YouTube video, one, you can like it or download it if you want, and you can also scroll down below the video, and there's a description. And in this description of this video, if you scroll down, I'm going to put a link to my page where I put all my philosophical writing. And there's a lot on what I just described, and there's always new essays being added. Last year I've added 12 new essays, and I rewrote one other. And I actually wrote one small book, all in just the last year. So there's always stuff being added there, and a lot of my material can be downloaded for free there as PDF. So check that out if you're interested, and maybe I'll be back soon with another talk. I haven't quite decided. I'm only 25 minutes in. Nobody's showed up so far. They still might, but we'll talk about something else. Anyway, Jay Baba, thank you for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.